This is the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast, presented by Massage Envy, the first podcast devoted entirely to Arkansas baseball. Featuring insight from Arkansas baseball color analyst Bubba Carpenter. Here's Matt Jones.
Postseason time, Arkansas will be back at Baum-Walker Stadium this weekend. The Razorbacks for the start of the Fayetteville Regional. They will host Santa Clara on Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock at Baum-Walker. And in the other game at 8 o'clock Friday night will be between TCU, the Big 12 tournament champion, and Arizona, one of the last four teams into the NCAA tournament. Matt Jones with Bubba Carpenter. And Bubba, you know, this feels like it's a good draw for Arkansas. You got some teams in here that have been inconsistent, like TCU and Arizona. You've got Santa Clara in its first postseason in 26 years. You don't ever expect the tournament to be easy for any team, but you know, just from this isn't Nebraska coming in here in 2021. This isn't having to go to Stillwater last year. It just feels like it's a little bit better draw for the Razorbacks. Anything can happen in the baseball postseason, but when you just look at it from, you know, an on-paper standpoint, I don't know that Arkansas could have gotten a better grouping than it got.
No, I agree, Matt. I don't think, you know, people, when it first came out, people, of course, were complaining about it. Oh, it's no fair. It's a tough draw. You know, why do we have TCU and why is Arizona here? But it's a fair draw. I mean, I really like it. Santa Clara, don't know a whole lot about them. Trying to learn a little bit more about them. I know they score a lot of runs. They've got a couple of pitchers that are really good out of the bullpen. You know, when it comes to TCU, we've seen them. I think we need a little revenge factor against them. They beat us 18-6 early in the year, but we're a totally different team now than we were then. That was a game, and I don't know if I'm sure you remember, we were adjusting to the pitch clock.
Oh yeah.
You know, and I honestly think they were starting that clock early because that was really, I mean, it came down every pitch. We just felt our staff felt rushed, and TCU took advantage of it and stole a bunch of base. I mean, it was kind of just a crap show, to be honest with you, just adjusting to the pitch clock. But I think we've adjusted, and I think we're a different team now. But you know, and as far as Arizona goes, they're last team in, probably one of the last teams in, and a lot of people feel like some other teams got snubbed to get Arizona in. But I tell you what, they're a team that's got power. It's a big physical team, and so I really think it's a fair draw for us. You know, I think we match up well against all three teams, and if we go out and play Razorback baseball, we're in good shape.
Santa Clara, as I mentioned, first time in 26 years that they're in the NCAA tournament. They're led by a coach named Rusty Filter. And if you follow West Coast baseball at all, you know his name. He's a longtime pitching coach. I was at Stanford before that, was at San Diego State for a lot of years. He was the pitching coach for two top overall draft picks, Steven Strasburg at San Diego State in 2009, Mark Appel at Stanford in 2013. So there's a pretty good track record there with him as a coach. He's in his sixth year at Santa Clara. And as you would expect, Bubba, with somebody, you know, that type of reputation, this is a team that can really pitch. You look at them nationally, they're, I think, top 35 nationally in WHIP, top 35 in ERA, top 35 in strikeout to walk ratio. This is a pretty good pitching staff. But the caveat there that I would say is that they probably haven't played a whole lot of games against a team with a lineup as capable as Arkansas's.
Well, they say pitching and defense wins. And if you look at their team, that's kind of their model. But they score a lot of runs too. But you're right in the sense that, you know, I look at people compare stats all the time, and you know they're comparing, you know, Santa Clara's stats to ours, the TCU and Arizona. I don't think you can compare, because no matter what those stats say for those other teams, they're not playing in the SEC on gauntlet for 10 weeks. You know, like the Razorbacks are. And so I think it's really hard to look at stats and say, okay, you know, you can't compare them. It's not apples to apples because of the competition we're playing. I try to take every team that we play, look at them, put them in the SEC West and say, how would they finish in the SEC West? And that's kind of the way I view, that's the lens I view everything through. And, you know, but with that being said, you know, they've got some guys that know how to pitch. You know, they've got the one reliever, Skylar Hale. You know, he's one of the few players in the country that's hit over 100 miles an hour this year, which, you know, we're used to velocity. So 100 miles an hour if you throw it down the middle, it can still get hit really hard. So I'm real concerned with that. But they've got some guys that can pitch, and so anytime you got a team coming in here that's got guys that know how to pitch, anything can happen.
Yeah, Arkansas saw Paul Skeens last week throwing 103 miles an hour. They were able to get some hits off of him. And we'll talk more about that matchup against LSU and what you saw from the Razorbacks down at Hoover here in a minute. You look at TCU. You mentioned Arkansas, seen them. You mentioned the pitch clock thing, the second game of the year. I think there were 5 pitch clock violations in that game, or maybe there were 4 pitch clock violations. Maybe a batter didn't get in the box. It was the first weekend of the season. There were evaluators there. The umpires were really under a lot of scrutiny. It's kind of like when you watch football or basketball, they talk about the points of emphasis in officiating every year. And it seems like it really gets emphasized early in the season, and maybe it's a little bit more lax as the year goes along. I think that's probably what the umpires were feeling that weekend in Arlington. TCU, they actually hit the skids after they beat Arkansas. They beat Vanderbilt in the first game really well. I think 11-4 was the final. They beat Arkansas, pretty badly in the second game. And then they blew a late inning lead against Missouri the next night. And that started an 8-9 stretch for TCU where, they just didn't play very well. They weren't playing real great teams. They were kind of hit and miss in the Big 12 tournament. They lost a series at Texas the last weekend of April going into May, but then they beat the Longhorns on May the 1st in the series finale to avoid getting swept. And they've been red hot since then. They're 15-2 over their last 17 games. They won the Big 12 tournament last week, beat Oklahoma State in the championship game. We've seen TCU, Bubba. You know that they're a capable team. They're a dangerous team, but I think the thing with them and Arizona is that both of them they've struggled with consistency this year.
Well, and that's the thing is, Matt, you just said it. They're 15-2 in their last games. I mean, it's not the best team doesn't always win. It's the team that's the hottest. And you're coming into a weekend series like this, to a regional, all you got to do is just play good for a few games. And that's the thing. And that's why every regional's tough. People don't understand how hard it is to get to Omaha. It doesn't matter who you're matched up against. It's who's the hottest team right now. And, we ran into that a couple of years ago with NC State. I mean, they were hot. They got hot at the right time. Look at Ole Miss last year, last team in, got hot right at the end of the season. They win the whole thing. And that's kind of the thing, so any team in front of us, has a chance to win. I really feel like where we're at as a team with the adversity we've gone through, I think if we go out and we just play Razorback baseball, I love our pitching. I love the way our pitching's lined up. I think we get a few guys in the middle of that lineup hitting. We're a team that you don't want to face.
I failed to mention at the start of the podcast, we're going to have Eric Sorensen from D1Baseball.com on the podcast a little bit later. He covers West Coast baseball for D1. He's based in California, and then he went to the Big 12 tournament last week, and he saw TCU play there. So he's got a pretty good feel, I think, for all 3 of these teams that are coming into Fayetteville. Looking forward to talking to Eric here in just a little bit. You look at Arizona. They're coached by a former big league manager, Chip Hale. You don't see that very often in college baseball. You saw the Wes Johnson move to Major League Baseball, and that was kind of unprecedented. It's kind of unprecedented the other way around, too, where you've got, someone who has managed at the highest level who comes back down and manages at the college level. He played for the Wildcats in the 1980s. He took over what I think was kind of a ready-made lineup. Jay Johnson had been the head coach at Arizona. You and I have had this discussion, Bubba. I think that he's a really good evaluator of hitting. You've seen that at LSU, some of the players that they've been able to bring in. He inherited some of them, but he did the same thing at Arizona. And there's a lot of these guys who are left over from the Jay Johnson regime. And I think they've got 5 players who hit over 335. They're one of the best hitting lineups in the country. Your point is well taken about comparing stats, but in the games they've played, offensively, they've been very good. And they've got some big prospects, I think, at the plate who these teams in the Fayetteville Regional are going to have to navigate against.
Well, you go into the stats, you talk about a 320 team average, 93 home runs, 552 slugging percentage. I mean, you're right. They're a team that can swing it. And the thing that things that I look at is what kind of team are they offensively? You look at Santa Clara, they're 38 sacrifice bunts, Arizona 8. So that says a whole lot about their team philosophy. They're going to get up there and swing it. They've got some big physical guys that can hit the ball. Their problems have kind of been pitching. They've had a hard time on the mound, stopping the other teams from scoring. So I think that's going to be a good matchup. Also, I think that Friday night game, TCU versus Arizona, is going to be a fun game to watch.
Arizona, one of the last 4 teams into the regional. They are into the regional round. All of these teams that are coming to Fayetteville kind of got hot at the end of the year. Santa Clara 8 in a row. TCU comes in with 6 in a row that they've won. We mentioned 15-2 since May the 1st. Arizona, they probably weren't going to get into the tournament 2 or 3 weeks ago, but they got hot. They beat USC, who was another bubble team at the end of the season. I think 1, 2 of 3 games in that series. They go to the Pac-12 tournament. They win a few games, get to the championship game where they lose to Oregon. I think before that loss to Oregon, they had won 7 of 8. So it's almost like Arkansas is the team that is the coolest of the 4 teams. Now, I don't know that means anything because of the competition that the Razorbacks have played. They played Vanderbilt at the end of the season, played a couple of pretty good teams down in Hoover. But how do you think maybe this time off changes these teams? Does it cool anybody off? Because baseball is one of those sports where it feels like you just want to get out there and you want to keep playing every day. And everybody who's coming in, they're all going to have layoffs of somewhere around 5, 6, 7 days.
Yeah, I think it can. It can affect some team negatively. It can affect some positively. I think it's going to be huge for the Razorbacks. First of all, we were on the road for 11 days, something like that.
Yeah.
So to get back home to Baum Walker, I think it's going to be a good, just dose of medicine for our team, just to kind of get us back, in the right mindset. I think being back at home, we played great at Baum Walker. What are we, 30-4? I think at Baum Walker this year.
30-4 and 19-3 against teams that are in the tournament.
Yeah, so I mean, you look at that, and that says a lot about the way we play at home. I think we hit better at home, we pitch better, we play great defense, we do everything better at home, and the guys are comfortable. Baseball players are creatures of habit, Matt, and they have their routine here at home, and I tell you what, it really works. And then the Baum Walker crowd is going to be a huge factor, I think, this weekend. I think these guys respond really well to the fans, and so I think for Arkansas, it's going to really benefit us, that time off and now getting back here at home, because I think we were tired. We played like a tired team that last day in Hoover, and so I think it's going to be good to get back home. Now, as far as Arizona, TCU, I don't know if it's going to cool TCU off or not, that break, but I do know it's hard for a visiting team to come in here to Baum Walker and win.
I think that 19-3 record is just as important as 30-4 when you're talking about how good Arkansas has been at home, because like Tennessee, they've got more wins than anybody else this year at home. They've got 33, but you look at their home schedule and you compare it against Arkansas's, and to me, it's not really comparable. I mean, even every SEC team I think that came in here made the NCAA tournament, even in the pre-season or the non-conference play. Eastern Illinois is in the tournament. Wright State is in the tournament. Army is in the tournament. I think there's another one who came through here who's in the tournament outside of the SEC. And so, they played really good teams. And I think that's important because, it's not that they're just beating up on cupcakes at home. It's that they've really been challenged here in this ballpark. And, some of those teams that they beat, I think about the Army game, they took them down to the wire. EIU took it to them one day here at Mom. Those are experiences I think that have helped this team throughout the year and maybe have made them even harder to beat at home.
No, I think so, Matt. And I think it's, playing those teams, DVH, they did a great job putting a schedule together. We learned from the RPI, how much influence is put on the RPI, emphasis put on the RPI last year when we ended up in Stillwater. And so Dave made an adjustment, brought the right teams in here. We were able to get some big wins. That's why our RPI was so high this year, and it paid off. But I really do. I agree. I think all those, we're battle tested here at home, but something about Baum Walker, the magic of Baum Walker, we find ways to win those games here at home. And, I go back to the Brady Slavens, dribbler down the line, it hits the base, ends up being a triple. Things like that happen here at home. We're on the road. We just don't seem to get those breaks. And I say all the time, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of talent to get to Omaha, but you also have to have the breaks. I mean, we could go out. You could go out. You got to have a little luck in there. We could go out Saturday afternoon or Friday afternoon against Santa Clara and line out 10 times, and they could bloop 8 balls in and win the game. You just don't know. That's why you play the game. That's why the game of baseball is going to be frustrating sometimes. But I still say if we go out and play Razorback baseball, we're going to be in good shape.
It's going to be a big crowd this weekend. Tickets, you can't get them. Probably 12,000, 13,000, something like that are going to be in the ballpark for these games. Arizona, they hadn't played in front of that crowd. Santa Clara, they hadn't played in front of that crowd. TCU did. Arkansas and TCU actually played in front of 20,000 people the second night of the season. That's the biggest crowd in college baseball this year. The only time that'll be eclipsed is going to be at the College World Series here in a couple of weeks. So TCU, they played in front of that crowd. I don't know if they've played in front of that crowd in a road environment. When they played in Arlington, I think there's probably 2-to-1 ratio Arkansas fans to TCU fans. But that's still probably about 5,000 or 6,000 people that came over and supported the Horned Frogs in that game in Arlington. So just something to keep in mind this weekend is that a couple of those teams haven't played in front of that crowd. And I think that's one of the reasons Arkansas has been so good at home during the postseason. Is it's a totally different feel than I think a lot of teams are accustomed to seeing in road games. Arkansas is going to play. Or one other point, real quick, Bubba. You mentioned the RPI from last year. Arkansas's RPI going into the postseason is third. Last year it was 41st. This year, I don't think but one team outside of the top 16 RPI got to host a regional. So it just kind of shows you how important RPI has become. And then from a strength of schedule perspective, Arkansas's non-conference strength of schedule last year was 157th going into the postseason. This year it was 37th, and so they've really made a lot of gains from that perspective, like you mentioned. They're going to play the early game Friday, 2:00 first pitch. This is something we've seen with Dave Van Horn throughout the years. 2018 they did it, 19 they did it, 21 they're going to do it again this year. When you are the host, you get the choice whether or not you want to play the early game or you want to play the late game. I think I've heard this. I may be speaking a little bit out of turn. I think under the former AD, the preference was to play the late game because you can get more people into the ballpark potentially. It's easier for them to get to the ballpark. Arkansas did that in 2017. They won the first game. They lost the second game. Missouri State was a little bit more rested. Ever since then, they played the early game. They have won the second game, and they've gone on to win the regional each time. Van Horn says that he learned this from Wayne Graham, that the preference ought to be to play the early game for a number of reasons. You can navigate delays easier than the teams that are playing the late game. This time of year, when do the thunderstorms pop up? They pop up, typically later in the afternoon in our area. There's and then obviously you get more rest either way, win or lose, before you go into that game the next day against the team that plays the late game. So it's kind of a desirable thing, I think, for Arkansas to play this early game. And I mean, if you look at the track record here, 2017, it didn't work out. Every year since then it has. Why would you change it?
Yeah, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? I think
Yep.
I think DVH, I think he's right on this. And I do know that there's a lot of people that would rather play that Friday night game. We talk about the resiliency of this team. Our fans are the same way, Matt. They're going to find a way to be there. There's going to be a lot of people calling in sick to work on Friday. I have a feeling, but they're going to find a way to get to the ballpark at 2:00. But Dave's absolutely right on that because there's thunderstorms supposed to be around this weekend.
Yep.
You don't want to be sitting at the ballpark 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night waiting to play on Friday night. You just don't want that. So I think it's the right move. Play that early game, get it over with. That way you're not sitting around all day thinking about the game. You go out there and you play it, you win that game, you get it over, and you get ready for the next day. So I absolutely agree with Dave. As much as I would love to see that Friday night game under the lights with 12, 13,000 crammed in Baum-Walker, it's the right move.
This is where it's fun doing what you and I do because this is work for us.
Yeah,
We don't have to call in sick. We call in sick, we're idiots because we're missing the fun.
Oh, I tell you what, and I tell you, I think people really they take a regional for granted at home and the super regional. I think last year the fact that we had to travel to Stillwater and in North Carolina, I think people really appreciate the fact that hey, this year we're at home.
Hmm.
And I tell you, I think there you said 12 or 13,000. I was saying yesterday 11 or 12,000, but you might be right. They're gonna I think tickets are incredibly hard to get this year, and I think that place is going to be crazy packed on Friday. And man, I can't wait, Matt.
We don't know what Arkansas is going to do from a pitching perspective. We think that's going to be announced Thursday during uh, what I call media day, basically the day before the regional starts. All of the teams come in and they have about an hour 15 practice window on the field, and then you get to go out and talk to whoever you want to, coaches, players, you name it, for these teams. If from a reporting perspective, we think Arkansas might throw Brady Tigert. Uh, Again, that's just a guess, but you just kind of look back at what ways Arkansas has approached the regional opener in the past, and typically you don't throw your ace game one. And so it would be a little bit of a surprise to me if you saw Hagen Smith start the first game. It'd be a little bit of a surprise to me if you saw Hunter Holland start the first game. So that's why I say Tigert. Not only that, but we know that this staff is really into analytics. They're really into batting splits. And if you look at Santa Clara, they hit about 15 points lower against right-handers than they do against left-handers. Tigert would be starting if he does on 5 days rest. That's one less than I think he's thrown on this year. Although I think he may have thrown 5 days rest when they played at Vanderbilt. Now that I think about it, but either way, it's. I mean, how do you think they approach this from a pitching perspective, Bubba? I mean, do you think it's Tigert?
I think it's going to be Tiger. He threw 64 pitches. It'll be on 5 days rest after throwing 64 pitches. I think that's the best move. From the analytics, like you said, they hit a little bit lower against righties, but I think it just makes sense to go with Brady Tigert, and then who comes in next depends on the score of the game.
Mm-hmm.
If Brady goes, I think they're going to stretch him out a little bit longer. I think he's ready to go, 70, 80, as much as 90 pitches if he had to. I think if we get a lead, we'll see like a Gage Wood come in after him, or Cody Adcock, someone like that. If not, if it's a close game, I think we'll see Will McIntyre come in. And so I think it lines up perfectly to have Brady start that game, and then you've got Hagen and Hunter Hunter Holland coming up after that. So I get the two lefties names backwards sometimes, but
Yeah.
but with those two waiting in the wings for the next day, I mean, I think that's a perfect scenario for us if we come out with Brady. And it's not like we're pitching off. Brady's one of the best. He's got some of the best stuff in the country, so we're
Mm-hmm.
not pitching off. It's just a better matchup.
I mean, Tiger's going to be a big time draft prospect next year. We all know that. Who knows? He may be their number one starter next year. That'll be kind of interesting to watch going into 24 between Tiger and Hagen Smith. With Tiger, Chris Budden, who was the field reporter for SEC Network during the tournament down in Hoover, before Saturday's game against Texas A&M, she said that she had spoken with Matt Hobbs, and Hobbs told her that he was fully confident if it were a regional setting that Tiger could go 90, 95 pitches right now. And so I think you're right. I think we're going to see him extended out a little bit. You mentioned he threw 64 pitches last week. He had thrown 60 something at Vanderbilt the week before, maybe 62. So they tried to keep it at the same number of pitches back-to-back weeks. They built him up to this point, and the whole point of kind of the way they've brought him back was trying to get him built up for the postseason. Well, the postseason's here now, and I think this might be the first weekend where you really see them just pull back on, or let go of the reins and let him go.
I think so. And what's impressive, Matt, is you look at Brady against A&M. He went 3 1/3, 3 hits, 1 run. He walked a couple, struck out 3. He didn't have his best stuff at all. But even with Brady not having his best stuff, he was able to limit the damage. Now he got his pitch count up a little bit earlier than it wanted, but he's so good that even when he's not hitting his spots, He had a hard time, landing that breaking ball. He was pulling his fastball a little bit glove side. He's still able to gut through it and get through 3 1/3 innings. And that just goes to how good Brady is, how good his stuff is. And so, yeah, if he gets a chance if he gets on a roll, he could go a long way on 80, 90 pitches.
What do you think the lineup needs to do to turn things around? Van Horn said after the SEC tournament that he thought that offense was going to be really key to them in the regional. I think he said something to the extent of if we don't get it going, it might be a quick postseason for us.
I honestly think, and people disagree with me, I think you're getting back here to ball marker. These guys hit better. I will tell you, when you come home to your home ballpark, it feels different stepping into your home batter's box. It just feels different when the pitcher steps out there on the mound and you're in the box. You see the ball better at home. Um, I think these guys are going to do well. I really do. I don't know if Dave's going to shake up the lineup or not. He's got options. He's got a ton of options he could go with. I mean, we could sit here and speculate on it all day. I mean, you could if you wanted to, move Peyton Holt up to the 2 hole, slide Kendall down to the 3, slide guys down a little bit, move Caleb Cali up in the lineup a little bit. Or you could just roll with what we've been doing and say, hey, we're back here. You're veteran guys. You're a captain. You're a veteran. Go out there and get it done. And that might be what we see. I tell you, Jace Borfin's a great player. He's been struggling a little bit. He's what I call caught in between. He's late on fastballs that he should crush. Then he cheats a little bit, pulls off, rolls over one, chases breaking balls. He's doing stuff that he didn't do early in the year. His strength is his approach is best when he's looking center, left, center, staying on the ball. And if it's inside, he just pulls his hands inside and drives it. I think Jace is going to get going. My pick to click was Jared Wagner. I think he's going to have a huge series for us. I think he's too good of a player. He's a veteran guy. He came to Arkansas to play in games like this weekend. And I think he's going to come up huge for us. And so I'm not really worried about our offense. I really think we're going to go out and get it done this weekend. And I usually say, everyone says pitching and defense wins, Matt. And I agree with that to a certain extent, but I think it's key for our offense to get going this weekend. I think they're going to.
One of the things I've been really encouraged by, Bubba, is the play of the bottom of the order. Peyton Holt, 7-hole, been really good. Parker Rowland, and he's still kind of inconsistent, but John Bolton, that 9-hole, you think about the game he had against Texas A&M last week, hadn't played in about a week, comes back from the ankle injury, has big RBI double down the right field line. I think he's hitting something like 323 in the last month of the season. That's pretty good for your 9-hole hitter. And I think that Bolton's taken a lot of crap this year for what he's done offensively. There hadn't been a whole lot of guys that have been more consistent than him over the last 4 weeks.
Yeah, you're right. Plus, he's played great defense. It was good to see him back out there on the field. He looked like he was moving well. Made a really good play with the infield in. Came in, got a ball, threw it home, got the out at home. I thought he looked good. He looked good at the plate, even on his outs. I mean, he had good at bats, and that's really what you want. You're just gonna go up there and try to win pitches, and then ultimately win at bats. But I think he's looked good. And talking to Nate Thompson back, month and a half or so ago, he kept saying, hey, he's looking better. His batting practice is getting better. He's feeling better in the batter's box, and it's starting to show in the games.
One other thing here before we get to Eric Sorensen, Van Horn during the postseason, it just feels like something clicks with him. Like I don't mean this in any bad way, because I do think he stays consistent, and he's talked about, in the past how, consistency is the key. But man, it's like there's regular season Van Horn and there's postseason Van Horn, and it just feels like a totally more focused, intense coach. Maybe I'm totally wrong about that, but that's just the perception that I've gotten, covering his team for 15 years. What do you think it is about what he does during the postseason that is so successful when it comes to pushing all the right buttons?
I think it's consistency, like you said. If we go back to the regular season, how does Dave approach every game? It's 27 outs at a time. He basically counts outs throughout a game. And the thing about Dave that makes him so awesome that, I talk about guys like Jim Schlossnagle, just on a whim, he runs out to the mound, makes a pitch and change in the middle of the bat, their pitcher in the bullpen's never ready. They have to stall. Guys like that, Jay Johnstone, the same. They have to slow the game down to give their pitcher time. It's just little things like that. DVH doesn't do that because the thing I love about Dave and I try to incorporate when I'm coaching. I'm not as good at DVH, but and we're in the first inning, Dave's in the fifth inning in his mind. Or when we're in the fifth inning, his mind's in the ninth inning. He's thinking about the lineup rolling over, what about this matchup here when the lineup does roll over? He's so far ahead of everyone else. And I think that's what makes him so good in the postseason, because in the postseason, it truly is one game at a time, one out at a time. And they really value just the value of 90 feet on the bases. And I think that's what makes Dave so good and his team so good is because they understand that early in the year. They don't wait till the postseason and, this is how we're going to play. They play that way from day one of the season to the end of the season. And I think that's what makes them so tough to beat when it comes to postseason.
Eric Sorensen of D1 Baseball coming up next. First, we want to tell you that the Whole Hog Baseball podcast is brought to you by Massage Envy, voted the best day spa and best massage in all of Northwest Arkansas. You can visit Mike and his staff in Tuscany Square at 2603 West Pleasant Grove Road in Rogers, or in Fayetteville at 3557 North Shiloh Drive. Massage Envy has services for everyone. MassageEnvy.com.
Massage Envy with clinics in Rogers and Fayetteville has been awarded Northwest Arkansas's Best Day Spa and Best Massage. One of the reasons is our care for athletes, both serious and recreational. We now offer rapid tension relief sessions using a high-caliber vibrating tool and total body stretch sessions like the ones used by the PGA. Both of these new services can be combined with the always popular deep muscle treatment. So whether you compete or just want to relax, there is no place better than Massage Envy.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
With almost 30 years in business, the Teague Law Firm can help with most family law and criminal law issues. Call James and the Teague Law Firm at 479-531-2785.
We're excited to be joined by Eric Sorensen of D1Baseball.com. I think he does a great job covering West Coast baseball for that publication, which they do a great job covering college baseball in general. Eric's been on the show before. Eric, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I usually don't get called back for a second date, so thanks. Yeah, I think
this is our third. I think this is our third. So.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
So
I don't count well either.
We're glad to have you. Hey,
man.
So you've got a good feel, I think, for Santa Clara and Arizona, just because you West Coast baseball to me it's like watching the Korea League. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just they play at hours where we're just not accustomed to being able to see them. And then, you think about the Pac-12 distribution problems that they have with their network, and it's just not a very, it doesn't have a wide appeal, I feel like. But you've got a pulse of that league. Let's start, though, with Santa Clara. This is a team that Arkansas is going to play first. Bubba and I were talking earlier about Rusty Filter, who you look at, the pitchers that he's put out, whether it be Steven Strasburg at San Diego State or Mark Appel at Stanford. This is a guy that's got a great track record of being a big-time pitching coach, and it seems like he's got Santa Clara turned around a little bit as a program.
Yeah, he's done a good job, and he's well regarded, as you're kind of just alluding to, well regarded out here, and been at a couple different places, including San Diego State and Stanford. And this team that he's got this year is very much his personality. It's kind of a weird team because the West Coast Conference will be, they're normally, they get a lot of good talent that goes through there, but normally it's like your gym rat types. You got guys that are 5'10" and 160, but they just hustle their butt off.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what baseball is like in most of the WCC. But Santa Clara, they're kind of a different animal. They're going to be more like, I'm not going to say SEC like, but kind of in a way that they slug the ball more. They're more physical. They kind of have guys that look good coming off the bus. That's kind of their MO. They play in a really big park out there in Santa Clara at Schott Stadium. And they've still hit over 70 home runs, and that's kind of unusual for a team that's playing in the West Coast Conference, to be honest with you. And so, yeah, they're kind of a reflection of he's kind of built it up to have some athleticism and some big power arms, which is a little unusual for the WCC. But yeah, it's good to see what he's done. This team was a little inconsistent this year. That's why they didn't win the West Coast Conference. I thought they had the talent to win it, but they were a little inconsistent. So we're not sure what you're going to get when they show up this week, but it'll be interesting. It'll be fun to watch and see how they do out there with some of these big boys that they'll be facing up against.
It feels like consistency is the word we keep coming back with all three of these teams, TCU, Arizona. We've talked about that too with them. Tell me about Santa Clara from a pitching standpoint. I know they haven't announced a starter for this weekend. Looks like Cole Kitchen has been their number one starter for most of the year. And then I'm intrigued by this big right-handers that they have, Hales out of the bullpen who throws 100.
Yeah, that's a big dude. No, yeah, it's one of these teams where the starting pitching didn't really shine this year. Cole Kitchen did a pretty good job. He's the only starter that has an ERA under 4. But what's really strong about them is it doesn't really matter who they start this weekend. More than likely it will be Kitchen, but it doesn't really matter because the strength is in their bullpen. I think Rusty's probably going to go to the pen a little earlier than most. Yeah, like you were saying, Skylar Hale's a guy throw triple digits, which is really weird to see for a West Coast Conference team. Him and August Souza are their two big guys as far as saves totals go. Both of them really throw hard, big throwers, and just know how to pitch. It's not just a power game. They just, Rusty's really good at teaching the game on the mound, and these guys just kind of know how to pitch. They've really got a good knowledge about them and use all their, they just bite at the corners. So yeah, you're going to probably see if it comes down to it, you're going to probably see Skylar Hales and August Souza come in. Blake Hammond is another one that's really good out of the pen. All three of those guys have ERAs below 3, and again, none of them are starters. So it's kind of a weird thing where the starting pitching has got more of the heliumite ERAs than the relievers do. So be interesting to see how Coach Filter does what he does and how soon he goes to the bullpen with going into an atmosphere like Arkansas. Now, one thing I will say about Santa Clara is they've played generally in the past, they've gone to places like Vanderbilt. I believe they went a couple of years ago, but this year they played a very regional schedule. The only team they played outside of the Pacific time zone, I believe, was Villanova early in the season. So they played a really regional schedule. So I know that kind of hurts the RPI for teams out west for whatever reason it does. So this will be their first venture into a really different environment. So we'll see how they handle it. But pitching wise, yeah, I think they'll be good. I think the key for Arkansas or whoever they end up facing second round is getting some early runs will probably be the key for when you face Santa Clara.
I know the answer to this. They haven't played in front of 12,000 people this year, have they?
Oh, in total, yeah. They played in front of, if you add them all up, yeah, they've played in front of 12,000. No, this is obviously going to be certainly a different environment for them. Some teams will crater to it, and some teams will be like, hey, I'm geeked. Let's get this going. So we'll see how they handle that. But again, they've gone on the road and played at bigger places in the past in the early part of the season. This year, they just didn't do it. They stayed mostly local, if you will. But they do have some good wins against Washington and Stanford and UC Santa Barbara. So they have proven they can play with the big dogs and beat them from time to time. But yeah, this will be a really bizarre environment for them.
One of the things I was so impressed with New Jersey Tech when they came in here 2 years ago is that they got off to a great start against Arkansas. And then it took Arkansas bringing in Kevin Kopps and throwing for I think maybe an inning and a third or close to 2 innings to kind of get things stabilized while their offense catch back up. And so it's always fascinating to see how those teams that, are the 4 seeds, how they handle these big time atmospheres.
Yeah. And yeah, of course, obviously nothing close to what they're used to. And yeah, sometimes these teams just stick their chest out. They're chicken hawks and they can go in there and they don't fear anything. I would assume that Coach Filter kind of is hopefully going to, is going to be that way and have his team play that way when they go in this weekend. But I'd forgotten about that New Jersey Tech. That's a good point. They played really well.
Yeah, they had Arkansas shaking a little bit early in that game 2 years ago. Let's talk about Arizona. This is a team that's got, from all indications, and I haven't seen them play a lot this year, but I have read quite a bit about them over the last few days. big bats in their lineup. And,
Yeah.
and Bubba and I were talking earlier. I've got a lot of respect for Jay Johnson as as someone who can really evaluate hitters. We've seen that at LSU and some of the names that he's brought in there. And I think he did a good job of it with Arizona. And it seems like a lot of these guys are left over from the Jay Johnson regime. Either they played for him or maybe they were recruited and signed by him.
Yeah. This is a team. It's as opposed to Santa Clara, this is a team that's just hoping for an arena football score type of game. They're not going to pitch the hell out of you for the most part. But yeah, they've got some athletes and some guys like, you just look at the top, like Mac Bingham and Chase Davis, the two big dogs, both hitting in the 369 range. Nick McClarty and Tony Bullard, Tyler Casagrande. These are all names that have been around, like you said. I mean, since it seems like they've been like their 5th or 6th year guys almost. They've been around a long time with the program, and they were came in under Jay Johnson. So yeah, these are all guys. And the thing about Arizona is they play. I talked about Santa Clara playing a big park. Arizona plays in a cavernous stadium, and their outfield wall is like 15 feet tall. So to see them have 93 home runs, it's almost like they always have more triples and home runs, it seems like. But they have 93 home runs. That's very much like, if you want to put it this way, it's very much like an SEC type team. So this is a team that's really going to take advantage of the heat and humidity and send some balls long if they can. And yeah, they've just, like Chase Davis, just a real specimen, and 21 home runs. He's the guy that's gonna bring in all the runs. He's the RBI leader for them, and just all through the lineup though, they've got a lot of pop, and they don't steal a lot of bases. They do rely on just getting up there and bashing the ball every few batters. So that's kind of going to be their MO going up against whoever they go up against.
Bubba and I talked about this a little bit ago, but it seems like Santa Clara, and this is based on really not seeing these two teams play, but looking at their stats, it seems like Santa Clara is maybe your more traditional West Coast offense, and Arizona is not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's certainly the case. I mean, Santa Clara, the Brigman brothers, Dawson and Coleman Brigman, two guys that are both, they can hit home runs. They've got 18 between them, but they're big stolen base guys. I think you're going to see a lot of running from them. Santa Clara's have stolen over 70 bases this year. And one thing I forgot to mention, by the way, even before the selection committee had announced the brackets for this, one of the teams I kind of put a check mark next to when it came to number 4 seeds was Santa Clara. I kind of thought whoever gets them is probably going to be in for a tussle. They're probably one of the better 4 seeds. And I looked at it, and according to Boyd Nation's ISR rankings, they're number 58 in the country. So that's a pretty good indication that they're a pretty strong. I think Arkansas got a really strong 4 seed. And yeah, this is a different kind of team. Santa Clara is going to do a little bit more station to station, even though they have hit a good bit of home runs. But Arizona's they're just going to wait until somebody hits a 3-run shot, and that's kind of what their MO is going to be.
I've read some different stories from out west this week. I read one in the San Francisco Chronicle yesterday that quoted Rusty Filter, and it quoted David Esker at Stanford and some others. But basically, the feeling is that West Coast baseball just gets overlooked versus SEC baseball or ACC baseball. What are your feelings on that? Because, you look at this right now, and the only regional that's west of Stillwater, Oklahoma is the one in Stanford. But the Pac-12 did get 5 teams in, but because nobody's going to go to Stanford during the regional round, everybody else is getting shipped off, 1,500, 2,000 miles or farther away. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's kind of weird because I've gotten a perspective from both. I mean, I went to an SEC school, but I've lived out here on the left coast for a long time now, for 20 some odd years. And it's just for years you've heard the coaches complain about the RPI. And I think Boyd Nation even points it out on his website, how the RPI, it's tough on teams that are kind of geographically isolated, like especially, BYU or Gonzaga or New Mexico. It's especially tough on them. But to be honest, it's always kind of underrated. I know probably people get tired of hearing that, but the West Coast really is. I mean, if you think about it, the best players out of high school come from California, Texas, Florida, generally. I mean, you'll have others but all the California talent out here. I mean, there's still a lot to go around for other teams in the country, obviously, but yeah, just talent wise, they're always good. I think what you said is really true, that like the Pac-12 network really screwed itself by not getting with DirecTV. At least I can't get the Pac-12 network, and I live out here, because I'm DirecTV. So you don't get a lot of, your teams don't get seen a lot. But I think the Pac-12, the West in general had a pretty strong year. I don't know if it was really reflected in the bids because they only got 8 teams west of the Rockies that got into the NCAA tournament.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's always a little underrated, and that's you hear that a lot, but I think it does ring true. It's not like the West Coast is winning national championships every year, but they are sending teams to Omaha every year. And you've had Oregon State win a recent national championship. Stanford's been there 3 straight years, and you had Washington go and for a few years, like from 15, 16, 17, 18, I think it was, you had the Big West send a team every year to Omaha. So it's good baseball out here, and it's a different type of baseball, and it's again, it doesn't get the exposure it should because of some of the Pac-12 deals that really got screwed, is one of the bigger things about it. But don't be surprised at how these teams will do this week. I think it's going to be a good challenge for Arkansas and TCU, a team I saw this past weekend at the Big 12 tournament. It'll be a great test for those two teams. It'll really be interesting to see how those two do in particular.
Hey, we remember that Oregon State national championship. You don't have to remind anybody about that.
Yeah, that's true. That was a great series. Even though it was unfortunate not that Arkansas had that one, it was still a great series. And yeah, it just kind of proved, I think, the West Coast has some good teams and they can play with anybody. So that was your prime example. Yeah.
Let me ask you about TCU because we saw them the second game of the season. They played Arkansas, right. Beat them 18-6, and that's early in the year. Both teams are still trying to figure themselves out. Now you got this complete TCU team. Kind of this what you saw from TCU last week is going to be what you see from TCU this week, at least from a personnel standpoint. What did you see from them when you were down in Arlington?
Yeah, it was interesting because they really dominated. I mean, this was a team that. I think they came into the Big 12 tournament. I want to say they came into the Big 12 tournament on a 12-2 run, just starting to really get their sea legs about them. So yeah, I saw a team that was really, we talked about or Santa Clara, I should say, being a pretty good home running hitting team and also being able to steal a base. Well, TCU kind of pushes that to the nth degree because they've hit over 70 home runs and their stolen bases up to 129 on the year. So don't be fooled by the 295 batting average. I think that's, I think they do a lot of little things too. They do a lot of little things. They're very versatile. I think that's one of the things that Kirk Sarlos said after one of the games. He said he was just, because the first game they won by run rule. And he just said they were really good about playing every facet of the game offensively, even the short game, bunting and hitting and run and all that. So yeah, I saw a team that was really hot, really confident. Kind of, like I said, kind of got their sea legs about them. And I think this is the team they were kind of expecting all year. I know you said in the earlier segment, you were talking about consistency, and all 3 of these teams that are in Arkansas's regional can say, well, we really played like crap at certain parts of the year. And oh boy, we played really great here lately. So yeah, this will be, and again, this is another thing I'll kind of point out. When before the brackets were announced, I thought TCU was another team. I knew they were going to be a number 2 seed. And they kind of remind me of that Oklahoma team last year, which, kind of muddled around a little bit. And then it caught fire in the Big 12 tournament, which is what TCU did too. Just their offense went off. And, they springboarded that to the national championship, to the championship series, I should say, against Ole Miss. So I wouldn't be surprised to see if TCU makes that kind of run. I kind of see that similarities that they had with OU last year from their team last year. So they got a pretty complete team, and they were a team I thought was going to be a pretty scary 2 seed. And it looks like Arkansas, the Fayetteville Regional, got 2 of the teams I was sort of kind of hinting at before the bracket was announced that, hey, these guys might be tough. And so this will be a good challenge for the Razorbacks.
Just as an aside, you mentioned Kirk Sarlos. I think he and Matt Hobbs are probably 2 of the top pitching coaches in the country right now. Certainly, they're among the most well respected. You got Filter. We mentioned the pedigree he has. Dave Lawn is the pitching coach at Arizona. Mark Pryor was his guy at USC many years ago.
Right.
It's a pretty impressive group of pitching coaches that are going to be in this regional.
Yeah, that's true. It is, and of course that only means you guys that there's going to be a lot of home runs in 17-13 games now being played.
Hey, we lived through the Stillwater Regional last year. We can we can handle about anything that's thrown at us.
Oh, that's true. I totally forgot about that. Was football score central there.
Oh my.
Yeah, there's a lot of pedigree to these pitching staffs, and there's no, it's not a surprise that TCU, once Schlesinger moved on, TCU immediately glommed on and said, hey, we want Saarloos to be our guy. So yeah, that's not a surprise.
There had been some West Coast teams that had gone after Kirk Saarloos as a head coach.
Sure. Yeah, he's a Fullerton grad, and Fullerton would have loved to have had him come in because they've been hitting the skids the last few years. I mean, that Fullerton's is a blue blood name in college baseball, but they hadn't played like it recently. And yeah, they wanted him badly. They wanted to get him back. I think it's just a case where Kirk kind of looked around and saw kind of just saw what he could do with a team, with a program like TCU, and thought, all right, no, this is kind of the Power Five I want to be in right now.
I want to ask you about a couple of big prospects, and you mentioned Chase Davis earlier at Arizona.
Yeah,
you guys have him at D1 Baseball pretty highly. Baseball America, they updated their top 500 this morning. They've got him as the 28th overall prospect in this year's draft, and that includes high school prospects. Braden Taylor is another one at TCU who is probably going to be a first-round pick this year. Tell us about Taylor and Davis in particular, because these can be two guys that got their names called pretty early in the draft in a month or so.
Oh yeah, there's not a lot I can add to what you said about Chase Davis. Just physical guy, looks like a linebacker, big time bat, good discipline too. I mean, he did strike out, what I'm looking at now, he did strike out 40 times, but he also has 42 walks on the year. That kind of tells you a lot. So up to almost 500 on base percentage. So yeah, that guy's just disciplined. And then with Braden Taylor, he kind of came into the Big 12 tournament. I think he's hitting like 295 or something, not like what he really wanted to be at, but he ended up with a 305 average after just going off. I mean, I think he had, was it 3, maybe 4 home runs on the week there in Globe Life Field, which is a pro park. So it was really impressive. And there was no wind behind him or anything like that. So I was really impressed with Braden Taylor. I mean, I've seen him play a couple times over the years, but boy, he really put a charge in a couple of balls. And the other thing about him, the third base, he played the hot corner so well. I'm not sure how his defensive skills are being evaluated for pro ball, but man, he seemed like he was really hot with the glove this past week when I saw him. So complete player, and he does everything well. He's even, in fact, I'm looking at it now, he's even a perfect 12 for 12 in stolen bases. So there's not a lot he can't do. So yeah, he played really well and showed a big stick, bigger than I thought I would see when I got out there this week. So he's just complete player. Both of them are going to be really great pro players.
Well, and those are just the guys that are going to go pro this year. Hagen Smith,
Right.
probably a first rounder next year, or borderline first rounder for Arkansas. You never know what some of these freshmen are going to do from these different programs, and so
Sure.
ought to be a lot of talent out at Baum-Walker Stadium.
Oh yeah.
And that real quick, you mentioned you went to an SEC school. Was it Mississippi State?
Oh no, how dare you? No, I went to LSU actually.
Okay. I couldn't remember. I know we've had this conversation before.
Yeah,
So
maybe so. Yeah, maybe we had. But yeah, I went to LSU, and so I saw those teams that
The
Skip
Burtman
Burtman
years.
out there, and even before that, I would go to games out there. There'd be like 50 people out there when six-pack Jack LeMabe was the head coach. So I saw the whole transformation of that program and how he built that team with look like, talk about Chase Davis looking like linebackers going up to the dish. So yeah, I saw all that happen.
Okay. And have you been to a game at Arkansas? I think you came
Oh yeah,
3 years
I've been
ago,
there
right?
a number of times. It's been probably, I think it's been 2 years since I was there last, but I've been there, I want to say 3 different times, and every time I'm just really blown away by the stands are great. I mean, the grandstand is great, and it's a great stadium. I love Bond Stadium. But when you go out to the left field and you see all those people out beyond there, just the number of people out in the left field, like with all their grills and everything like that kind of blew me away the first time I went there, like 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah, it's a really cool environment. It's always the best for the regionals too. It's something about,
Oh yeah.
obviously it's something about the warm weather. And of course, now we're going to be dodging some rain this week, but something about the warm weather, the big games, all of it just comes together to make a really cool environment on these regional weekends.
That's fun. And of course, being I grew up in Omaha, and so I bleed red, big red football and Creighton basketball and all that. But Dave Van Horn being who he was to put Nebraska baseball on the map, he's a god, up there. And it was a bummer he had to leave, but you can just see how good of a coach he is. just from, it's every other year you're seeing Arkansas playing back in Omaha again. So what he's done for that program is pretty amazing as well.
Tell me if this is a stretch. When Arkansas played Oregon State for the championship in 18, I went around and talked to some Nebraska fans about Van Horn. And, Arkansas is always it seems like they're kind of the hometown favorite when they come up there.
Yeah.
Because of that Van Horn connection to the University of Nebraska. But I had one guy tell me that Van Horn was to baseball in Nebraska what Bob Devaney was to football.
That's kind of true, except the son of a bitch left, and then we don't get to have him winning games for Nebraska anymore. No, but it's true, because that's a good analogy, because Bob Devaney came over from Wyoming, early 60s, I guess it was, turned that thing around completely, and then handed it off to Tom Osborne and all that. And that's kind of what you get from Dave Van Horn, because they were just off the grid. There was nothing about Nebraska baseball. I think they'd been to the regionals in '85. Maybe one other time before that, before he got there. And so, he just transformed the program. He just put his winning pedigree to work and put it on the map. And, Nebraska hasn't been able to keep it going like that, obviously, but they've had some good teams over the years, and they've built a really great facility, off of what Dave Van Horn did. So, that's a good analogy.
It's amazing to me. And then we'll let you get out here on this. It's amazing to me what Van Horn has done throughout his career in the postseason. And you get to a certain point, it's like it's not a fluke. There's something there's some sort of formula or something that he has figured out in the postseason to be able to get to Nebraska to go to the World Series back-to-back years, to be able to average a World Series appearance at Arkansas once about every 2.5 years. It's incredible. You just don't see it from a whole lot of other coaches in the nation.
No, and of course, what they're building beyond that, I guess you guys had even more facility upgrades here recently. I don't see that really going anywhere. I know Dave Van Horn doesn't have another 15 or 20 years in him or anything, but for every year you kind of look at it and it seems like I think Kyle Pearson said in the announcement show, it seems like every year they're in Omaha, or every other year they're in Omaha. And, that one year they got upset by NC State, you expected them to be there in Omaha. And so, he just puts them in a good place every year. And kind of like with Skip Bertman, his teams usually, not every year, but usually kind of seem to play their best when they get to the postseason. We'll see if that happens this week. I think you guys have a really tough regional this weekend, depending on which teams show up for Santa Clara, Arizona, and TCU. It could be, who knows, it could be a breeze for Arkansas if these teams, kind of play like they have in spots this year. But this wouldn't be a shock to see Arkansas. Obviously, they're a 3 seed, so it wouldn't be a shock to see him get to Omaha again. It would just kind of add to his pedigree. And the one thing is, he said at the post game a few years ago when they had that unfortunate loss to Oregon State and lost the series, he said, we're going to win this thing sometime. It's just a matter of time. So he sounded confident about it. And I'm not going to bet against Dave Van Horn in postseason. No, not at all.
Well, we've said this many times. If you continue to put yourself in a position to get back and get back and get back, eventually you're going to break through, probably. It didn't happen for Florida State and Mike Martin, but for most programs, it has happened. And it feels like with Arkansas, whether it be the money they pay their coaches, whether it be the facilities they're building, the type of recruiting that they're doing, they're putting themselves in position to get back every year. And then at some point, it feels like they're going to break through.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see when Van Horn finally does step aside. Again, I'm not saying it's going to happen soon, but it'll be interesting to see how Arkansas go, what direction they go. But whoever they go with, like you're saying, I mean, they just have everything they need there. Everything as far as facilities and all the resources they could possibly need, and the history theirs too. So. Yeah, this is a program. Obviously, you're in a good spot though, because you're not going anywhere anytime soon, Mac, and you guys are going to be good year in year out. So this is good on them.
You gonna be at a regional this weekend?
Yeah, I'm heading up to Stanford, the only one that's close to me out here. I'm heading up there, but that's obviously, and I will say this, it's my favorite place to go to a regional because it's always 75 degrees and sunny, and then like down into the 60s once the sun goes down, and it's great. It's great baseball usually too, because Stanford has a history of the last 3 or 4 years of kind of coughing up the first game or the second game, the championship, and then having to fight their way back. So last year against Texas State was one of the best environments I'd ever seen for a baseball game, and that was at Stanford, where people are usually just sitting back and sipping wine while watching the game. So this is going to be a fun atmosphere. And they got a pretty good regional up there too, with A&M going up there and Fullerton finally getting back to the postseason.
Yeah, A&M, we saw them in Hoover last week. They've
Yep.
kind of turned it around a little bit. That's an
Yeah,
interesting
they're
matchup,
kind
I
of like
feel
TCU. They seem like TCU kind of scuffled a little bit in spots and then, put on a pretty good show in the conference tournament.
Well, and they've got a coach like Dave Van Horn and Schlossnagle who knows how to get teams to Omaha, and he's got that track record. So you guys do a great job covering college baseball, and I know you'll have people at the different regionals throughout the country at d1baseball.com. Eric, we appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks for the airwaves, man. I love being on.
All right, appreciate it. We'll have more on the Whole Hog Baseball podcast in just a moment. Our thanks to Eric Sorensen from D1 Baseball for joining us on the podcast. Lots of great insight there from him about the teams that are going to be in the regional this weekend. Arkansas, one of 8 teams in the SEC that's hosting a regional this week. There's 10 SEC teams in the regional overall. 8, that's a record by one conference. 10, that ties the record that the SEC had in 2014. Bubba, we just look at some of these regionals real quick that are going to include SEC teams. Auburn's going to host Southern Miss, Penn, and Samford.
You look at that regional, Matt, and I mean, obviously the clear favorite is Auburn right there. I mean, they've got a good team. I mean, we know how good they can be. You look at those teams and you compare them to what we're facing. I mean, to me, that's a way easier regional, but once again, it's baseball. You never know. And Auburn can be really good at times, and then sometimes they can be really bad. So we'll see which Auburn team shows up, but I see them getting through that regional pretty easy.
Couple of interesting things there. Southern Miss, this is going to be the last go around for Todd Berry, their head coach. He's retiring at the end of the year. That was a team that some people thought maybe should have hosted a regional. I think they're going to be a tough team there for Auburn to deal with. I was listening to Mark DeRosa on MLB Central this morning, and he played at Penn, and he said that he and a bunch of his teammates actually got on a Zoom call with the current players last night, just kind of tell them about, hey, this is what the NCAA postseason is like. Penn, this is their first time to make the postseason since 1995.
Wow. Well, with those storylines and with Southern Miss with last year for Barry, their coach, guys can rally around that. And we know how mental the game of baseball is. So a little rally cry like that for your head coach, that goes a long way. I mean, that could make things interesting there in that regional, but you just never know.
LSU, they got the cupcake of the year. They get Tulane, who's 19-40, but won the American Conference tournament. They're going to play LSU in the first game. I bet you Paul Skeens is not going to pitch that first game for the Tigers. Oregon State and Sam Houston State also in that regional.
Yeah, Trey Morgan might pitch that first game. Yeah, they got a little bit of a cupcake there, but yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
South Carolina, they're going to host Central Connecticut State. We saw them in here a few years ago. Campbell, who a lot of people thought maybe should have been a host. They're there along with North Carolina State. You think about the way South Carolina ended the year, you get a couple of teams in there like Campbell and NC State. It might be a long weekend for them.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, that might be a tough one for them to come out of. You hear a lot about Campbell, and they're kind of, a lot of people's favorites there for a while. People were talking about them. So that'll be interesting to see how that one shakes out.
In Gainesville, Florida is going to host Florida A&M in the first game. UConn, another team that may have been a regional host. They're going to be in there as the 2 seed. Texas Tech comes in as the 3 seed. We've seen them plenty of times. I know this isn't maybe your typical Tim Tadlock team, but man, that's a program that knows how to win in the postseason.
Yeah, you're right. That's another fun one right there. That Texas Tech team, they can be good at times, and so and I love Tim Tadlock. I've known him forever, and so yeah, that one's going to be that could be a fun one.
What a character, Tim Tadlock. I mean, every time Arkansas plays them in the postseason, I want to make sure that I'm there. Every opportunity you get to talk to him because. And the story, I mean, the story of kind of how he was a junior college coach and living in the dorm with the players, with his wife and kids, to go from that to being a real successful coach at Texas Tech, just a great story, I think. One other thing, Florida, that ballpark, wind just blows out. That's why you see so many home runs, I think, at Florida. Texas Tech, they can really mash the ball. And there may be some high-scoring games there. It may be kind of like I don't know if I'd ever say anything's going to be a repeat of the Stillwater Regional last year, but it might be this year's version of the Stillwater Regional, just in terms of teams really getting after it on the scoreboard.
Yeah, and I tell you what, Florida's a good team. O'Sullivan does a good job with them. They're a good team. There's a lot of guys on that team that's going to play in the big leagues one day. So that is a fun matchup.
In Lexington, there is apparently a country music festival this weekend, and so all of the visiting teams, Bubba, are staying in dorm rooms. West Virginia, Indiana, and Ball State are going to be staying on campus at various dorms on the UK campus.
Wow, that doesn't surprise me. When you talk Kentucky, something's always going on in Kentucky. So I don't know what's going on there, Matt. But anyway, I think Kentucky's going to be all right. Kentucky's a team, or they're another team that plays great at home, but they just can't win on the road. So, until right there at the end of the year, they kind of fell apart at home at that last series. But they're a team that's hard to beat at home.
That's a real regional too. You got 4 teams that are very closely concentrated there geographically going into Kentucky. You didn't see that at a lot of the regionals this year. Vanderbilt's going to host Eastern Illinois, Oregon, and Xavier. Yeah, Nashville. I think it'd be a surprise to any of us if Vanderbilt didn't come out of that one as a winner. And then in the other SEC hosted regional, Alabama getting a regional at home for the first time in 17 years. They're going to host Nichols, Troy, and Boston College. BC, another team. They've gone into SEC country and won this year. They beat Tennessee on their home field on a Tuesday night back in March. And they're a team that they felt like they got gypped from a hosting perspective.
Yeah, that could be a good one. But I tell you, Vanderbilt, you kind of glossed over Vandy. We need to talk about that for a second. I feel like that they kind of got it. I mean, Oregon, I don't know. I just feel like Vandy got kind of a little cupcake regional right there. I don't think there's I don't know. That's just my opinion. I don't think they're not really challenged with any of those teams. I think you're going to walk through that one.
I think there's a lot of teams that are hosting regionals, so you might be able to say that about this year. But I do agree with you. I think Vanderbilt got a nice draw for their regional. I just don't really see any of those teams really challenging them as long as their pitching is healthy. That's been the question for Vanderbilt this year. Tennessee's going to Clemson, by the way. That could be a lot of fun.
Well, I feel we said all along I would not want to be the team where Tennessee comes in as a 2 seed. They're a dangerous team. We know how good their pitching can be at times. They're going to kick the ball around a little bit, but they're going to score some runs, and their pitching's really good. So, I mean, that's a real dangerous 2 seed, probably the most dangerous 2 seed there is out there.
Yeah, kind of a rematch of the Orange Bowl last year when Tennessee played Clemson in football. You had a couple of big personalities there with Eric Bakich at Clemson, his first year. What a job he's done, by the way, to get them in the position that they're in. They're the number 4 national seed. And of course, Tony Vitello at Tennessee. And then the other SEC team in the regional this year is Texas A&M, and they're being sent out to Stanford in what is an otherwise all-California regional. Stanford, the host, of course. Cal State Fullerton is the 3 seed, and San Jose State is the 4 seed.
Hey, I tell you, watching A&M play in the SEC tournament, their pitching's come around. I mean, they've got guys that are dealing on the mound right now. If their pitching holds up, their offense is scrappy. They've got guys like Boast, that come up with some huge hits against us all week, and he had big hits. If A&M keeps playing like they were playing in the SEC tournament, they can get through that regional. They'll beat Stanford.
More on the SEC tournament here in just a moment. First, I want to tell you that James Teague has joined his father, Robert, at Teague Law Firm, which has been around nearly 30 years. It was voted Best of Northwest Arkansas in 2019 and 2021. James can help you with most family law matters, including divorce, custody, and child support. He can also help with criminal law, including felony and misdemeanor offenses. If you have an estate need, James at Teague Law Firm can fill your need there too. Teague Law Firm is a full-service law firm where you will talk to actual lawyers. They will call you back and give you their direct cell. Call James and the Teague Law Firm now at 479-531-2785. That's 479-531-2785, or visit them online at teague-law.com. The Teague Law Firm. If we can't help you, we'll talk baseball.
As a former Razorback pitcher, James Teague spent years closing innings. Now he's closing cases. With almost 3 decades in business, the Teague Law Firm can help with most family law issues and criminal law. Call James and the Teague Law Firm at 479-531-2785 or visit them at teague-law.com.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for Whole Hog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
Bubba, you were in Hoover. We did our last podcast after Arkansas beat Texas A&M in the first game, so we won't talk a lot about that game. But over those last two games, the day after we recorded our podcast, they beat LSU. They beat Paul Skeens. They hand him the worst outing basically that he's had all year. It tied the most runs that he's given up in a game this season. Now, granted, only 2 of them were earned. It gave up 5 total runs in Arkansas's 5-4 win. But it was a 5-run inning for the Razorbacks. I think it was a 5-run 5th inning against Skeens, 5-run 4th inning, maybe. Yeah, 5-run 4th inning. And it's the most runs that he's given up in an inning this year. The only other game where he had given up anything near that number was 3 runs against Ole Miss when Ole Miss hit a 3-run home run against him during their game down in Oxford. So it's almost like that scene in Rocky IV where the Ivan Drago he's cut. It's like, hey, look at him, he bleeds. And it was, I mean, it kind of felt like that with Skeens because he's just been so good this year and so dominant, almost feels invincible in some regards, I think. And all of a sudden here he is throwing 40 pitches. And I thought that was a big time inning for this Arkansas lineup.
It was huge. And he does bleed, Matt. He does bleed, buddy. I'll tell you where it started though. Tavian Josenberger started out the game with an 8-pitch walk. And honestly, I felt like from that point, Paul Skeens I watched him pitch multiple games this year. I like watching him pitch. He's an elite pitcher. He's going to pitch in the big leagues. I mean, he's got great stuff. I've never seen him as frustrated as he was that day against the Razorback hitters. He kept making pitches, and we kept fouling him off. I mean, we went up there and battled. I thought our approach against him was great. In the first inning, we had a chance to get on the board. He dropped a 3-2 slider on Jared Wagner, probably the best slider he threw the whole game. But other than that, I mean, he just looked frustrated. His body language, his demeanor on the mound was different. He just couldn't put away Arkansas hitters. And we went up there and just kept battling, find a way to win. The key against him is being ready. When you get that fastball, you got to be ready early in the count for it. And we were. And if we missed the pitch, we fouled it off. We just kept battling up and down the lineup. And he really was frustrated. The catcher's interference was a huge play in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Jay Johnstone's arguing about it. I don't know what he's arguing about. That's the catcher's fault. Milazzo stuck his glove. He was fully extended. And I mean, it was obvious. It was obvious that Kendall Diggs hit his glove. I don't know what they were complaining about.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's neat, the 2 different views. They thought they got screwed on that. I don't know if they thought it was a bad call. I don't know what they were arguing. I don't know how you can argue that. It was black and white.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with what DVH said. He's like, look, he hit the catcher's mitt and the ball still went way out into center field.
May
if
have
he
been a home
doesn't
run
hit the
without
catcher's mitt, that's a grand slam.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny your 2 different views on it, but that was that was an error on them. We took advantage of it like we've done all year. Peyton Holt had a really great at bat against Paul Skeens, a couple of really good at bats.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, up and down the lineup, I just thought we battled him great and really, really had him frustrated.
What was the bigger play of that game? Jace Morfin's 2-run single or Dalton Carpenter's catch out in right field?
Boy, that's tough. I'm kind of looking through the daddy goggles. I'll say Dalton's play was way bigger in that game.
I listened to your call. I mean, you could, and I can kind of. I mean, obviously, my kids aren't as old as yours are, but I could really relate with you. You can kind of hear your voice cracking up a little bit. There's some pride there as a dad.
Hey, I'm telling you, Matt, it was the coolest thing. And yeah, I've said it a couple times. The coach in me, I love the catch. I love the hustle. I like the full extension. I mean, that ball was hit hard too. Right-handed batter. Targac hit it and it was slicing. He made a great play on it. But the dad in me, loved the hug. When they showed the slow motion hug of him running up and jumping into Crystal's arms, I just thought that was incredible. And yeah, I did. I think I kind of cracked up a little bit on the air, but Phil did a good job of staying locked in, and
Yeah.
the SEC guys did a good job. Kyle Peterson and Todd Walker, they went down there and talked to Dalton and Crystal, and I just thought it was really cool the way they handled it, and it was just a really neat moment, and it's something I won't ever forget. Actually, a guy that used to coach for me actually printed off a couple of pictures and brought it to the facility last night. One of Dalton making the catch, and the other of him jumping into Crystal's arms. And so I've got them. He printed them out and framed them for me, and so we're gonna put it up in the game room. But it was a really cool moment, and and I know as a dad you can relate to that. It was just something really special.
What's Dalton, about 10, 11?
He's 11.
Okay, yeah, that's a fun age because they're still young enough to get excited, but they're not old enough to be too cool to celebrate something like that. Did you play with Todd Walker in Colorado?
He came. Okay, so I left and went to Korea, and then they brought him in after I left to go to Korea. They brought him in, and so he ended up finishing up the season there.
Okay.
But we've known each other for a while. Him and I actually texted back and forth about the catch, and so he was cool about it. He was funny. So we had a good time with it.
That's great. Texas A&M beats Arkansas 5-4 in the finale. That ended Arkansas's run there. And I got some thoughts on the format here in just a minute. But what'd you see from the last Arkansas game down in Hoover?
Well, I tell you, I was glad to see us fight back at the end. It made me feel, I felt a lot better at the end of the game. We battled back, had a chance to win it. I was disappointed in some of our bats. I felt like I said earlier, I felt like we were tired. I felt like we were a tired team. We had some bad at bats against Matt Dillard. Guys got a good changeup, and he kept getting us out with it. And I get frustrated, as a hitter, as someone that teaches hitting. I want to see guys make an adjustment. And look, it's easy when I'm up in the booth, but I don't feel like we made an adjustment against Matt Dillard. I feel like we struck out too many times. I don't think that staff should have struck us out. We struck out 14 times. And I'll tell you, Matt Dillard and Shane Sadeo, I don't think their stuff's that good. Brandon Garcia's got good stuff. Wansing's got good stuff. He came out and closed the game out. And, he made some good pitches against Borfin and Wagner. He really did to get those two big strikeouts there to end the game. But I think the thing that made me feel better is the way we battled back in that last inning and at least gave ourselves a chance to win.
This is not exclusive to the SEC tournament. I have a problem with conferences giving their automatic bids to teams. Tulane's a perfect example, going 19-40, and they're going to get the automatic bid, and they're going to bump out a team maybe like a Kansas State, who was really deserving, I think, to be in the tournament this year. UC Irvine's another team that didn't make it this year. And so it bothers me, and it bothers me the format of the tournaments, although there's really nothing you can do about trying to jam so many games into such a short amount of time. And I think about it like the College World Series. You've got basically a week and a half, close to 2 weeks, where you're eliminating 7 teams. Okay, now you compare that against the SEC tournament, where you're trying to eliminate 11 teams in 6 days. I don't know, it just drives me crazy how these conferences go all in to their tournaments and give their automatic bids out in that way, instead of giving it to the teams that have been better over the course of a season. And it's not just baseball; it happens in basketball. It happens, in every sport, basically outside of football. But it just bothers me, the format of these tournaments, because you get an Arkansas who goes 2-0. Same thing happened to Florida. They go 2-0 during the first several games or the first several days at the SEC tournament, and then they play the teams that they have beaten. They beat them, and just because they beat them in a certain round, they're the ones who move on to the championship. I don't know, it's a totally unequitable way, I feel like, to crown champions of these conferences.
Yeah, I agree. Phil and I talked about that on the air, the way it goes from single elimination to double to single. I don't like it, but I'm not the one that's going to get it changed. But you're right. And there's a lot of things, Matt, that I'm still not a big fan of the whole RPI system. I think that rewards some teams. I look at Kentucky. And I look at how high Kentucky's RPI. Where did Kentucky finish up RPI? I don't have it here in
They're
front of
top
me.
5. I'm not sure. They were number 1 for
Yeah.
the longest time. I think Wake Forest ended up number 1, but they're in the top 5.
I mean, you look at them. They're 16 and 14 in a conference. They're top 5 RPI. So you're rewarding a team not for who they beat, but just for playing good teams. And I think that system's kind of flawed. And I think there's been a lot more people complaining about it. I've complained about it for a while. I hated it last year. I think we got screwed last year, to be honest with you. I don't know. You might have some better ideas on it, but I don't like the way the whole system works. And I'll be glad when they start tweaking it a little bit. It worked out great for us this year because the teams we played went on to have good years. Our RPI stayed up high, but I think in a case like Kentucky, I think their RPI was way too high for how good they were.
Well, I think Aaron Fitt made a great point this week from D1 Baseball, and he said that, he hears everybody talk about complaining about RPI this, RPI that. Until you fix it, you can't really complain about it. The people who are complaining about it have to get, they have to get in gear. They have to get it fixed and come up with something better. It's the metric right now that you have for college baseball to really kind of offset all the discrepancies between the different conferences. Bubba and I, we don't know if we're going to be back with a podcast next week wrapping up the season, or if we're going to be looking forward to a super regional. The winner of Arkansas's regional is going to end up playing the winner of the Terre Haute, Indiana regional. That's being hosted by Indiana State. The Sycamores are a regional host for the first time. Also in that regional are Iowa and North Carolina and Wright State. We know a little bit about Wright State. We saw them earlier this year. Of course, North Carolina. Wouldn't that be something if Arkansas and North Carolina end up matching against each other again in the super regional, this time to be in Fayetteville instead of Chapel Hill. They both got to get through a tough weekend to get there. We'll definitely be back with a podcast next week. We just don't know if we'll be looking forward to a super regional, or if we'll be talking about the end of the Razorback season. For Bubba Carpenter, I'm Matt Jones. We appreciate you joining us. You can catch Bubba on the radio this week on the Razorback Sports Network as the Razorbacks play their home regional. And we certainly hope you'll come to wholehogsports.com throughout the weekend for all of our coverage. We got a lot of stuff lined up for over the next several days from the Fayetteville Regional. This has been the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend, everyone.
The proceeding has been a production of wholehogsports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at wholehogsports.com for the latest news and commentary.